welcome to today's webinar on leveraging ARP-HCY funds to empower students experiencing homelessness through community partnerships. I'm going to give folks just a minute or so as they log on and get settled, and then we'll dive into our rich conversation today. Well, good afternoon again, and to those of you who have just joined, welcome. We're so glad you're here for today's webinar. I'm going to get us started. My name is Erin Patterson. I'm Director of Education Initiatives at Schoolhouse Connection, and I would like to share a few general housekeeping reminders for you. Today's webinar will last 1 hour and 15 minutes. We're going to ask that you type any questions you have along the way into our Q&A box. We'll be keeping an eye on that. And that's where we'll look in order to feed questions to our presenters today. We'll also do our best to respond to every question if time allows. Just a reminder that this session is being recorded. Participants will also receive a certificate of attendance after the session is over. You'll also receive a copy of the slides via a follow-up email. And I'm very excited to share with you today, for the first time ever, we are inviting you to continue this conversation after the webinar in our SHC community on Slack. You can sign up at that bit.ly link there below, bit.ly SHC-Slack. We hope you'll join us over there. Slack is a conversation community where we are posting questions and examples of best practices for using ARP-HCY funds. And we wanted to take the opportunity, once today's 75-minute webinar ends, we want to continue the conversation over there, knowing that you all might have questions that are specific to your locality. Our staff will be on standby on the Slack community to answer those questions and talk through whatever you need about your ARP-HCY allowable uses. If you are not familiar with Schoolhouse, we are so glad you're here and that you've joined us today. Just a little bit about us. We are a national nonprofit advocacy organization, and our mission is overcoming homelessness through education from prenatal through post-secondary. We work at that goal at a number of different levels, including federal and state policy and advocacy, lots of practical assistance to states and school districts and programs across the country. And we always say the jewel in our crown is our network of young scholars who have experienced homelessness themselves and whom we are privileged to support through scholarship assistance and case management as they pursue their post-secondary education. We encourage you to take a look at our website, schoolhouseconnection.org. I always put in a plug for the Q&A from our inbox section. Chances are, if you have a question about something, someone else also has had that very same question, and we have answered it and posted it on our website. So lots of good information there. Really quickly, to level set for today's discussion, a reminder about American Rescue Plan Homeless Children and Youth Funds, including most recently the official guidance that the U.S. Department of Education released last September 12th, 2023. This guidance asks states to expedite funding, including by modifying administrative procedures, which often are creating barriers for these funds to be spent and utilized. The guidance also asked superintendents, school business officers, and other administrators involved in spending decisions to circulate this letter widely. And we have a 2-page overview on Schoolhouse Connection's website of ARP-HCY allowable uses, just as a refresher. For today's conversation, I'm so excited to hand it off to our amazing panel of experts from the great state of Michigan. And I'm going to hand it off first to Casey and let you all introduce yourselves along the way. Thanks so much.
Great. Thank you very much, Erin. We appreciate it. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Casey Gordon, and I'm the Regional McKinney-Vento Grant Coordinator for Kent ISD, and we'll explain how Kent ISD works in just a moment. Lisa, do you want to introduce yourself?
I do, when I took myself off of mute. Lisa Cruden, the Chief Program Officer at Family Promise of West Michigan. And I'll share a little bit more again about what Family Promise is and what our national and local affiliate do when it's my turn to present. And Deb.
I am Deborah Salguero from Family Service Coordinator from Family Promise. I'm excited to be here and look forward to our time together.
Great, let's jump into our next slide. So Kent ISD is a countywide service center. We provide support to 20 traditional districts across our county, 26 PSAs, and 68 private schools. We have about 240 schools in our area that we directly support, about 91,000 students. You'll see that little heart right there where Grand Rapids, Michigan is. We are about 3 hours from Chicago and 3 hours from Detroit. So we are smack dab in the middle, an hour from the lakeshore. Go ahead and go to the next one. So McKinney-Vento specific highlights. Michigan uses a regional consortia system so that we can provide more funding and more support to more schools across the state. So as part of that regional consortia, I not only provide services, training, and direct support to liaisons in Kent County, I also work with our neighbor Allegan County. Allegan County is a more rural area where Kent is urban, suburban, and rural at the north and south ends. So it's a very different sort of experience, transportation challenges, shelter challenges, et cetera. Last year, we identified 2,771 students as being eligible for McKinney-Vento. And of course, we know that's an undercount. We are always on the lookout for better ways that we can be more accurate in identification. And I provide direct support, services, and question and answer to 54 LEA liaisons. Let's go ahead. So let's talk about our why. When the HCY ARP funds became available, we knew there was a great opportunity because they are more flexible than our traditional McKinney-Vento funds. And we know that one of the huge barriers for our families and our youth is just simply trying to figure out how to navigate our central intake systems, our support systems, connecting with agencies, and how to overcome barriers to housing. Housing is usually the one thing we can't do, but of course it's the one thing that our kids need. So we also know that our school homeless liaisons, we have very few that actually this is their only job. And even for those very few, trying to fulfill the 10 federal duties on a regular basis to your highest level is almost impossible sometimes. Our school homeless liaisons are not well versed in navigating the housing system, the shelter response system, the prevention systems. Many of them, I have a full-time job as an assistant principal, and I'm also the liaison. That's what we typically see. And so they don't have enough time or background knowledge to help with housing searches and family stabilization. And then finally, we also know that this is a one-time funding source and it has a really short timeline in which it has to be spent. So it's unlikely that we would hire new staff without a plan to sustain those positions. Let's go to our next one. So that's why we knew partnering with a local organization would be the way to go. The McKinney-Vento Act mandates that we are all involved with our COCs and local planning board. And it is through the relationship and time that I've spent on committees and meetings with our COC that I've grown to know who are the partners in the area. Who are the people that have great reputations as partners? Who are the people that do a really great job and are already embedded in housing searches, shelter response, prevention? So Family Promise of West Michigan, we've worked with them on many projects, and they are known through our community as a leading agency in shelter and housing assistance for families. They also have great knowledge of planning, managing, and tracking grant-funded projects, which is key. This was a lot of money that has to be spent quickly in very specific ways. And we really needed a partner that understood MOUs, that understood how to track data, that understood invoicing. And they really helped our business office create some great systems for that too. They already had systems in place for hoteling, for shelter, for financial assistance and housing planning. And this family service coordinator position could go beyond what our liaisons could do. Deb comes in after our liaisons have done what they can do in their scope, and she is the next step, which is amazing. One thing you will note at the bottom and hear about more in our slides is that there are some things mentioned that Family Promise was able to do that are not allowable through these ARP-HCY funds. But what Family Promise was able to do, because they are a stable organization and a national affiliate, is they were able to leverage the funds in ways that they could use them under the federal guidelines, and then pull funds from other sources for things that we couldn't pay for through our ARP dollars. And Lisa, I'll turn it over to you.
All righty. So our Family Promise of West Michigan affiliate is one of around 200 affiliates throughout the United States. And I'll share a link with you for all of you that are out there in different parts of the United States, so you can see each one of us operates independently and slightly different, with a core focus on providing a continuum of services for families that have children who are experiencing a housing crisis. So we have a thread of similarity amongst all of us. Each one of us, again, has some maybe additional programs that they offer and are able to support their community with. Here in West Michigan, we have had a pretty lengthy time in our community. We've been here for about 30 years, and over the course of that time have been able to increase in our opportunities to support families, from not only just providing a shelter stay for families, but really trying to meet a family where they're at in their housing crisis, right? We know that each family, each student falls in a different space on that continuum, right? Where for us, we're able to talk about maybe we can support a family and they're staying at their grandma's house, brother's house, sister's house, right? Maybe a family needs shelter. Maybe they need and moved home, but they need some in-home case management work and support. Maybe we can provide, we have someone that is an expert on early childhood services. We'll have Deb, who's going to round out our conversation today and really talk about what we do with these particular funds, but just wanted to share what our affiliate here in West Michigan does. Next slide. And this, if you, and again, you'll have the links to do this and be able to peruse the link that I have on the bottom. So there might be an affiliate near you and a Family Promise that would have some of the opportunities to partner in the way we have partnered with our local ISD. Again, each affiliate is a little bit different. The one area, and I think why we've partnered so well with our local community and with the Kent County ISD, is we have a lot of flexibility in the work we do. We have really made it a point to identify funding sources and do our work in a way that doesn't restrict us, as we all know many funding sources do. And so we've really tried to allow ourselves a lot of flexibility. So where Casey had mentioned, and Deb will talk about, where maybe these funds aren't able to help, we're able to braid in other funding sources, right? We're able to make sure that the work that we're doing doesn't only have to happen in an emergency shelter, right, with restricted funds, but could happen at a school and all of the other places, so that we can support those that you might be working with that are not necessarily in a shelter, but for sure in a housing crisis, and they don't know how to navigate the system and where to go. Next. So as we kind of venture in a little bit on this conversation of, why we got to the place that we're at, that Casey had mentioned, and now really in those practical, like, how did we do it? What does it mean to have this partnership with our local ISD? What are kind of some of those nuts and bolts? For us, this partnership started about 2 years ago, and we had an MOU for around $200,000. And I kind of gave you a breakdown here. Some of that money was used for shelter, some of it was for staff, and then we had some that was available for financial assistance. And then we had some money internally that we used to match these funds. And you'll see on both sides of this slide that I'm not going to go through in full detail. Again, you'll have access to this. And I also, in your PDF that you'll get, there's a link that will give you our full MOU. So if that was something that would be helpful and interesting to you, you would be able to use that as a reference or a template. So here at Family Promise, in this agreement that we had with the ISD, we wanted to make sure, and we put, serve 70 families that had youth and students in the districts that were in need of some type of housing support, maybe emergency shelter, but they needed something that, as Casey had mentioned, that the homeless liaisons didn't have the expertise or the time for, right? Overworked school system, right? Every position, they are wearing multiple hats. So we really, in all of the area, that what Family Promise committed to, our desire was to support families, supports the school. For years prior to this MOU coming into place and for us doing this work together, we had been doing this at some level. If a liaison had a question, they were calling Family Promise. We were, regularly having opportunities to be in front of the ISD and liaisons and say, here's how you would interact with the homeless system, right? If you have a student and a family that's experiencing a housing crisis. So we had been feeding the school a lot of this information prior to this more formalized partnership that we have. And then this MOU allowed us a little bit more formality and allowed us to fund the position that we were doing with staff here at Family Promise. So again, you'll see on the right side, Kent ISD partnered with us, provided the money for us. We also really wanted to make sure in this space that we had some money for sheltering in a short-term stay if needed. So, right, maybe we had a student that needed emergency shelter for a few days as they were trying to reconnect or figure out in their school, they were having breaks in school attendance. So we wanted to use some of those dollars to ensure that we could get them on the right track, right? Allow them that safe place to be so that they can get to school, right? Because at the end of the day, right, a goal of this is that we can ensure that families and students have all of their housing and crisis needs met so that they can go to school, right, prepared and ready to learn, right, and be able to graduate. Like that's all of our goals here collectively, no matter what seat that we're sitting in. So again, you'll see some of those highlights and things that we had done. Again, you'll have access to a full MOU. Next. You can flip because that will be something that you'll be able to use and see. So we can go to the next slide. Some of the things that I wanted to highlight that we had talked about for us, and I had mentioned this partnership with the ISD really bridged a gap for us. We had been getting those calls from the schools, from Casey's team, from across our county for years prior to this. And we didn't have that formal way or funding behind it to be able to say, this is what we should do. And so it really bridged that gap. The liaisons had confidence that there was someone they could call when they didn't know what to do or how to interact with the system, right? It also opened up doors for us to reach more families who are on the verge of homelessness. I really think of that as that upstream thinking, right? And we also know that our families in your school districts across the country don't always have the same access to housing resources because perhaps they don't meet the HUD's definition of homelessness, right? And so but yet when you're bouncing around from house to house and unstably housed, we know the impact is vast, right? So we really wanted to find a way to partner. And so for us, this was a huge opportunity for us to ensure that that family doesn't fall so deep that they maybe did need to go into shelter, right? And so Deb does a lot of work on meeting that family where they're at, and maybe we can help them go from bouncing around right to stable housing, right? And help bridge that and not have that emergency shelter component. And I think one of the things that you're going to hear a lot about from Deb today is building our relationships with our McKinney-Vento liaisons. We're all in this work together, right? So now they have a trusted partner to call. They can pick up the phone. They can go on and do a referral right to Deb, and they're going to get a real live person to talk to figure out what should we do? What can we do? What are all of our options, right? That was a huge opportunity for us and continues to be. I think if I was to ask, and we'll share a little bit about what our liaisons throughout the community have said about this opportunity, I think that's the thing that they're most grateful for, is that opportunity to have an organization. They don't have to call into a system that they don't understand. They can call Deb, right? They can call Family Promise. So that makes a huge difference for them. And our partnership has provided connections for our families to have a lot of other resources that they might not have even known about because of, what their eligibility is and Deb's expertise. So it really, in those ways, helped us solidify some of the things that we were doing at a small level and brought it in. And especially with the funding that we had attached to this, allowed a lot of families to go from that housing crisis to stable housing in a quicker period of time with a lot less disruption in their children's school, which again is a focus for all of us. Next. And this one is going to we'll start our time from here with Deb, and Deb is really going to take us on a little bit of a journey on How, if you are a McKinney-Vento liaison and you are in our district and you encounter a family, a student who is unstably housed and they need a little bit of support, what do they do? So she'll provide how we're referred, and then ultimately some of the nuts and bolts of things that she does during her time with the family and with the homeless liaisons. So Deb, take it
Thank
away.
you. Thank you. So this is really an opportunity to share the day-to-day in connecting with the liaisons and the family and how that works for us. And so the relationships with the McKinney-Vento liaisons is very vital. It's very vital. So I always try to strengthen that any opportunity I have by getting involved in the school activities and an opportunity to share with the team. Any opportunity I have to strengthen that, I try to look for those opportunities. But as it relates to the families or the students that are facing some kind of housing challenge, we developed a referral system. It's a Google form that we use and that the McKinney-Vento liaisons can use. It's very basic. It's the name of the family, the district, the school, and it probably gives a brief 1 to 2 sentences of what the situation is, how to contact the family, and then I have a release of information for me to be able to begin to work with the family. So it begins with a referral, and then the referral comes into me, and it's connected to an Excel spreadsheet, which allows me to keep track of all the referrals that are coming in. Uh, and then I begin to contact the families. I make an effort to contact the families and schedule a time to do an assessment to figure out exactly what's going on, how did this occur, try to look for barriers, try to look for things that are positive that they have going that would help us pick this back up. And so that assessment time is very critical for me. It's a really important moment to the point where I feel I have to do it face to face because it really is tells a lot when you meet with someone face to face. And so we try to help find solutions until they're able to get into some kind of housing or remain in the housing that they have. And then we take it a little bit farther, and through some of the systems that we have at Family Promise, we're able to provide continued support for longer stability. So I appreciate that extra support that comes from Family Promise as I meet with families. Communication with families often continues after housing is secured. I really enjoy. I mean, when you put that personal touch to it, there's a connection, and that family realizes that if they're in a crisis again or they feel they're slipping, they know who to call and to call back Family Promise, and we'll open the door again and we'll see if we can redirect them again or put some more supports, connect them to community resources. And so that communication with family is vital, and it continues. I really enjoy it when it continues. I have some stories. I've had people that have sent me keys when they got into the housing. I've had people that have sent some beautiful notes and sometimes say Merry Christmas. I've got some Merry Christmas texts. So that was kind of nice. That was kind of nice to receive. We did complete or submit a questionnaire to the McKinney-Vento liaisons just to get an idea our first year how things are coming along, what their feedback was, what we could do better. And it really helps us to continue to move forward and fine tune some things. So I think we'll be able to share some of that in another slide that's coming out. You will see on the bottom is attached a copy of the Google form. So that will be available as well. Next slide. There it goes. There it goes. I want to talk a little bit about our meeting times with the family. Like I mentioned, I make every effort to meet with families at least once face to face. There's a variety of ways that we can communicate with the families. Sometimes it's a phone call, an email, a message. And one of the things that I've learned is I've had to be very flexible in meeting with the families. I don't want to create another barrier. So if I can be as flexible as possible to meet with the families, make them feel comfortable, make them feel we just have to address the issue. I don't want them to feel uncomfortable. So I try different ways and try to be flexible. One of the things that I have done that has helped me is in my car, I keep two lawn chairs. And this was more during COVID time, but if they're comfortable sitting outside on a nice, beautiful day, hey, let's sit outside. If they're comfortable sitting on their porch, we'll sit on the porch. I've gone to hotel lobbies. I've met people in our meeting rooms here at Family Promise if they're able to get here. I've met in school rooms, sometimes in different places like coffee shops. McDonald's is a common place that I meet families. It's easy for them to walk to. So just that flexibility to connect with the family is very, very vital. Meeting can be one-to-one. Sometimes I meet with the liaisons are part of that meeting, or a wraparound service team is part of that meeting. Another school staff, maybe the social worker or whoever made the referral, sometimes is part of that meeting as well, because we're working together. We're trying to collaborate together, pull our support together to see how best we can help this family. Some of the tools that I use in this process is that we have an intake form, and I think that will be available as well. We use a release of information to make sure we're able to share not only with the school, but with other community resources as needed. And then I also have a tier process. So as I meet with families, that tier process really helps me to determine how often I should meet with the families. So it would be 1 week, twice a month, or once a month, depending on their needs. If they're in housing, they're doubled up, it's okay, it's uncomfortable, but they're okay. It could be a little bit longer before I meet with them, as opposed to somebody who's already being evicted and tomorrow will end up in the streets. So I have a tier process that kind of helps me keep perspective of the families and how often to meet with the families. The other tools that I use often would be like a credit report. Many of them do not have an idea what their current credit report is. So that's helpful as we look for housing, a criminal history check. And then I also, if available, we can use the housing voucher application. Next slide. Are you able to hear me?
Hey, Deb, we can't hear you. Your audio is a little choppy.
Okay. Examples of how we've helped. Yeah, it sounds like my internet is in and out, so sorry about that. Hopefully it'll stay steady. Some of the examples of how we've helped is we've been able to use the funds for security deposit or first month's rent. I try to make it really some of the assistance that what the family has. I want them to contribute to it, to be a part of it, so they know that we're all working together. I look for resources in the community. We use the funding that's been available to us, and then we also look at family contributions. So all of that is part of the moving back into some kind of a rental. I have also been able to use some of the funding to help with back rent. If I know that the family is able to sustain themselves once they get caught up, I think that's a great way to use the funds, knowing that they're not going to be evicted. Some families have had some unforeseen circumstances that has caused a dip, which we all can experience those financial dips. And so, and then have a little bit of struggle getting caught up. So to avoid any kind of eviction. So we've used funds for that. We've used funds for rental application fees. They can be pretty high if you add 2 adults in there, or 2 or more adults in there. The fees are kind of high, so we try to assist with that. And if necessary, I do assist with some gas cards as well for the families. Next slide. Tips and tricks. These are just some of the things I've already mentioned before, that I make every effort to meet with the families face to face at least once in this process. Be very flexible with the meeting places. Make sure that your communication with the liaisons is pretty good. They want to know where the family is, if the family found housing, and how that impacts the school, as far as transportation, attendance. So the communication with the liaisons is very important. And then I also tried to find ways to connect with community partners in the community. The more resources that we know are available in each community, the more we're able to help families. And so that's why I love when the schools have those monthly community leaders meetings, because then I try to attend and I hear all these community partners are at one table here, and I can hear and get some of the names of the resources. Oh, I've never heard that one, and just write that down and put it under my belt as a tool that I can use later on. So those have been very helpful. Next slide. Additional support. Once a family has secured housing, I feel like this is the piece to the puzzle. Families, I've been able to help families get into housing. They're good, they've got in, we've been able to provide some support. But then that sustainability and that longevity, and this is where Family Promise has been able to really come alongside. They provide, we have a voucher for the Habitat Humanity Restore, where they can get one large furniture item or find something that's available there for their home. We have some household items and food from our pantry that's available for them. I just run a list of things that they may use or may need that they're able to get access to. And then we have our stabilization services, which is really just ongoing case management to work and support some of the goals that the family has so that they can sustain housing. I think all of that is just like the last piece of the puzzle so that the family can maintain that stability in there. Next slide.
And this is where I get to highlight a little bit of on some of what our McKinney-Vento liaisons have said about this process, right? So if this was something that your community was able to and interested in doing, how did it support them, right? How did it support someone that you might be sitting in that similar seat? So you know, our 92% of our respondents in our school districts have utilized, almost 93% have utilized this opportunity that we've provided them, right? They felt like our referral process was easy. We made it a Google form and we asked questions that weren't too much, right? That really met the need of the liaison and the school district. So we made the process easy. Deb, when she started, she went and met with every school district that she could. She went and did a road show. She took a field trip and just drove around, right? Because we know face-to-face interactions and getting to know who Deb was going to be a lot better than just sending out an email saying, hey, call me if you have a family, right? And so Deb went around and, you know, really introduced herself, made sure she was at every meeting that was possible for her to be at. And then every school, she had a spreadsheet of, you know, dozens of schools and who the liaisons were at each one of those schools. And did she connect with them, right? And then continue that over her tenure, you know, going on, you know, this is her second school year that she's been doing this, right? So she's got a little bit more experience under her belt. There wasn't very, you know, we had, you know, about 65% of our respondents said, you know, the process was pretty good. They didn't have a lot of challenges, right? And a lot of them said that the referrals that they made had been successful. So we were excited about that. The liaisons said, you know, I look at the second one, I wish that we've had that intervention sooner, right? Thankful for the support and the, you know, partnerships that we have, because the schools don't often have another organization pouring into them, right? Schools are often begging for resources and they're very, you know, resource, you know, depleted often, right? And so for someone to come to you and say, what can we do that could be helpful? How can we best support you? Here's my number and I'll answer the phone when you call, right? That was a really big deal for our liaisons and for us ultimately as a provider, because as I had mentioned earlier, we were allowed and it afforded us an ability to do this work a little bit more upstream, right? Those families that might have fallen into a further along in their crisis, maybe we prevented from some of those events from happening because of that upstream approach and opportunity to ensure that, you know, as soon as their housing crisis started, we could intervene, right? And so we were excited about that opportunity. A couple of things that Deb mentioned that I also want to highlight, and then, you know, maybe Casey has something that I don't know if she has anything that she would want to offer before we open it up for question and answer. But again, the face-to-face was really important, right? I mean, you know, just going on a website or calling 211 or that doesn't always work when you're in crisis. So having a phone conversation, a face-to-face conversation has been huge. The continued support that we're able to offer the school districts and mostly the families, importantly, the families, that's a big deal, right? It's not a one and done, good luck, we'll see you. But it's, you know, as Deb mentioned earlier, when she gets a call from a liaison and she meets with a family, she really quickly identifies how much time and energy and support does this family need, right? And then she caters her case management services to that family, right? Maybe a family only needs to meet once, every couple of weeks or a phone conversation, but the next family has to meet on a very regular basis because of a lot of different things, right? Their crisis, their situation, their access to resources, whatever that might be. So tailoring our services, which I would say a lot of our family promises are really good at. That's one of our core beliefs in the work that we do, is meeting that family and whatever continuum of their housing crisis that they're in. And then the housing focused case management, right? There's a lot of case management and wraparound. We are so focused and understand the housing world. Deb mentioned, understanding credit history and their criminal background, right? Those aren't intended to be looked at to try to find a way to say no, but to empower a family to say, here's what you have. When you go to a landlord, this is what they're able to pull. What do you want to work on? Credit reports. Do you want to work on, this is what it looks like. What opportunities do you have to increase that? Or your criminal background check, right? Looking at that criminal background check, saying, what would a landlord see when they pull that, right? And then put some narrative to it, because again, a background check has a lot of things on it, and some of it is not nearly as, difficult or challenging or bad as one might think when they first read it, right? Maybe it was a bump in the road, but you can provide some narrative to that, right? So that we can really support families. We can connect them to the banking system, to workforce development, right? Whatever it might be that that family needs. What transportation is a big one that Deb talks about, right? Like not just getting kids to and from school, but helping families get to and from work, right? Getting them to where they need to be, because if they have ability to go to and from work, they have an ability to make an income, right? Which ultimately allows them to be able to find housing. So really finding, childcare is another big one that we're asked about a lot, right? Most of our families don't just have one school age child. They have a younger one, an older one, right? So one of the areas that we've really tried to focus on, Deb gets the school age kids, if you will, right? Those often coming from our school districts, and we have an early childhood specialist on staff. So if Deb in any of our team is working with a family that has a 0 to 5-year-old that has maybe some unique and needs, some additional resources, we can connect to that person as well. We have a landlord liaison on staff. So if Deb is working with a family that has some housing barriers or is just looking for housing, Deb can reach out to our landlord liaison saying, here are the families that are looking for housing. Here's what they're looking to be able to afford, all of those things. And Julia can then add that to her list when she is out trying to identify open units in our community. So kind of have that wraparound here at Family Promise to be able to help Deb in this work that she's doing to ensure that, again, meeting that family where they're at on their continuum of housing crisis. Casey, would you add anything before we open it up?
Sure, I would. I would say that we have been so amazed with the outcomes of this partnership and this project, and we're so grateful for the opportunity for it, because we know our liaisons often feel like they're not doing enough because it's not their wheelhouse. They don't have those connections. They don't have that knowledge, that time. And for our liaisons to be able to say, I'm meeting my goals as a liaison because I also know that I have help. I've got somebody who is out there who can do stabilization and connections and childcare and help that housing search. And the project has been so successful that our state just reallocated some ARP dollars, and we will be able to continue this partnership throughout the grant period, but then also we'll be able to begin some new partnerships with 7 other community agencies, 3 of which serve youth exclusively. And so we're really excited about the flexibility that these ARP dollars have given us, because we're able to meet needs in a real and immediate way that we're often not able to meet with our typical McKinney-Vento Fund allowability. So we're just grateful this project has worked so well for our families and for our students.
Thank you all so much. I think we're processing the information and want to open it up for questions. And I want to start just by reminding our audience that you will receive a copy of these slides and a recording of this webinar. And to answer some of the questions that we've already received, anything that's linked in these slides, you'll obviously get a copy of. And so we had some questions about sharing the intake form or the tier process. I know that Lisa, you talked about the MOU, which was linked. So all of that will be included in what you receive as follow-up. And we're so glad to hear that those are useful and that there's interest in seeing those. I would love to start with some questions, if that's okay with our panel here today. I have to read this one off because I love it so much. This participant said, Deb, you sound awesome. Have you written any of your processes down in case you win the lottery or get abducted by aliens and someone fills in? Our district is realizing we have, quote, person-dependent systems. And I think that's such a great question. And I know that, Deb, you shared a little bit about your process and sort of the tips, but I'm wondering if you could say anything else about how you've been able to codify and formalize all of that.
That's an interesting question there, because in our last team meeting, we talked about putting something in place, and it's a goal I have this quarter to really put a workflow together, because I know what I do and where I go and who I talk with, but really, and you're right, what if I'm abducted? What if I'm abducted by an alien? So we're working on getting the process written down so that it is available and it's anybody can easily pick it up and know where I left off. So
that's great to know. Thank you so much for that. I'm scanning through our questions here. There's another one for Deb. Does Family Promise pay for motels or hotels when shelter is not available? Can you talk about that a little bit?
It depends on the situation. If I've had a family who was part of a house fire and the house is being remodeled and they know that they will be back into the house within a week or so, I do try to see if we can find funds to provide some kind of housing for them. So it depends on the situation. It's not part of a daily thing that I put people in hotels, but it depends on the need that I have. I don't know if Lisa wants to comment on that as well.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Again, these dollars in the beginning, we went through them very quickly. We have a huge need and not enough shelter here in our community. We're working on that. So we have absolutely, if Deb has a family that is experiencing literal homelessness, right, and has nowhere safe to be, Deb, is partners with our team who does that initial shelter assessment and then ultimately would place a family in shelter. So again, these funds allowed for that to happen when that was indeed the case. And we have our shelter system that we help support a family connecting to, right? And so I think that's also a big piece of what we do is, ensuring that when a family is in need and has nowhere safe, we're walking alongside of them to ensure that we help them find that safety. So it might be through Deb's work that she can do some problem solving, and maybe we find that you couldn't stay with grandma, but grandma knows because you're working with Deb and Deb is supporting that household that they're able to continue staying there for a little while. So when that doesn't work, we try really hard to be an organization that has funds and finds the money to do and provide that safe shelter. So it's a piece of what we do.
That's great to hear. I'm going to start to answer this next question and then would invite you, Lisa, to weigh in because I think you alluded to this as well. The question is, what's the official definition of homeless for these purposes? And for those who are new to Schoolhouse or new to homeless education, it's important to first say there are two different federal definitions of homelessness. Many people may be familiar with the one used by the Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD, which is limited to those staying in shelters or those who are unsheltered. The education definition of homelessness, however, is much more expansive. It includes children and youth who lack a fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence. And those types of residences can include not only staying in a shelter or being unsheltered, but importantly, it includes those who might be in a motel or hotel for a few days, families living in their cars, and what we call doubled up, those staying with others due to lack of adequate alternative. And it's actually that doubled up portion of our students who comprise the largest percentage of our students experiencing homelessness. And And so when we're talking about working with other providers, it's important to be mindful of those different definitions, because a lot of our families in the school system will not qualify for certain services through HUD and the homeless assistance systems in your communities. So I want to open it up to you, Lisa, or Casey or Deb, to weigh in a little bit on how you're seeing that difference play out and how that impacts the services that you're able to offer.
Yeah. I mean, you hit it right on the nail on the head, right? That is exactly the definitions that, we as as a continuum of care in our community, as a housing provider, for the purposes of these dollars and this partnership, right? We broadened our definition of homelessness to, in fact, meet what the definition that the Department of Ed has, right? So we're in line with the families that Deb is working with, have that align with, they're doubled up, they're on, in a situation that is not ideal. Oftentimes they don't have a lease of their own, right? They're doubled up, they just recently or have been bouncing around from place to place without a sense of stability. And so we can work with that, because that is the population, right, that we've are identified with this particular pool of funding. Now that looks different if a family ends up in an emergency shelter, right? We're only going to put a family in emergency shelter that's a category 1, literally homeless family who lacks a safe place to be, right? Because you're not going to bring someone from doubled up into shelter, right? Because they have that safe place to be. So we work internally under multiple definitions and feel really comfortable with that, because in our work, there's a continuum of homelessness and housing crisis, right? So we want to meet that family. And in this, for us, is this more upstream approach and opportunity, because, we're an advocate of that definition needs to be changed. We need to talk about in expanding that definition. It is not only those and family homelessness looks vastly different than our single population, right? And so we are in lockstep with our school and education department, saying, it's the expanded version that we really need to be talking about. So for us, in this purpose, we go with the Department of Ed homeless definition.
And we really appreciate that and appreciate the flexibility, because that is the number one frustration of all of my liaisons, that call central intake, go to your HARA. Well, when I have a doubled up family or a self-paying motel family or a youth who's couch surfing, then they're not going to qualify for the majority of HUD-funded programs in the area, which is really hard. We also strongly advocate the expansion of that definition. We need something that can really work with multiple situations. No two homeless situations look exactly alike, especially for youth. One way that we have really appreciated these ARP dollars is that there is a bit of a caveat in that HUD definition, where if you are paying for your own motel room, you don't qualify for central intake and HARA services. However, if another organization or agency is paying for that hotel room as an emergency shelter option for you, then you may be eligible for many of the central intake and HARA services. So we do feel that we have also been able to give our families a better chance to get connected to mainstream resources as well through those temporary stays.
And that is brilliant. And we love how school districts have been able to use funds that way. And Casey, I want to stay with you for a moment if I can. A question came into me directly, and I think people want to know, after hearing of this amazing partnership, how did you identify Family Promise as the right CBO, community-based organization, to partner with? How do you identify the best partners in your community?
Sure. So one key thing was being an active part of our COC. I have chaired 3 times in the recent history of it. And I really got to know who are the people in the community that are in the right wheelhouse, who can offer the most flexibility in terms of service and most expansive services. But then also, who do other organizations really like working with? Because they know that this is a partner that can be counted on and a partner that has great outcomes for families and children and youth. Family Promise was also very much willing to work with a group in our area called AYA Youth Collective, which focuses on youth needs, drop-in, transitional housing, et cetera. And so that if a unaccompanied homeless youth needed Deb's help, we could refer to Deb, and then Deb would connect them with a caseworker from AYA. And they were also able to access these services, hotel, etc. So part of it is just knowing who is out there and what they do, but then also knowing that reputation of who are the trusted partners in the community. We also knew that Family Promise was supportive of our schools and our liaisons, because a few years ago, we worked together on some presentations and advocacy on changing the homeless definition with the Administration of Children and Families. And having that experience and that trust already built, and the understanding of we both want to go in the same place and same direction for families and youth, that made a huge difference. And so that's what made me most confident that they were going to be the right partner for this project.
That's great to hear. Thank you so much. I want to offer this next question first to both Lisa and Deb from the Family Promise perspective, and then want to invite Casey back in to talk about it in general. The question is, does Family Promise serve your rural communities with housing supports? And would invite you to talk a little bit about that. And then Casey, would love for you to chime in on the specific needs in your rural areas that you're seeing.
We most certainly do serve families in the rural communities. We cover all the county. And so we do service them. It's a little more challenging, or their resources are a little bit more limited, but we do the best we can to connect with partners, work with the schools, work with the support systems that they have. Even the housing options are very limited in the rural area. So we just have to be creative. We got to have hope that there's something out there for the families, and just be creative and see what we can do. But we do service those families.
I would have nothing different to add. We are, all of Kent County, and as Casey mentioned in the beginning, it's urban and rural and very urban, right? A good mix.
It is, and the rural areas, the needs are very different. Many of my families are camping. They're in tents, they're in old campers that don't have utility connections. We see a lot of people in trailers or buildings, pole barns, etc., sheds that don't have heat, or they have cracked windows. And so sometimes the safety need really escalates, especially when we get cold in Michigan. We are a balmy 48 today, but in the past couple of weeks, we've had 4 snow days, which completely shut down our community. So those are the types of things we see. We also see a lot of multi-generational need. And so extended family, so connections also to senior agencies can be very important. And Family Promise has also been really great about, if I've got a family in a car, yep, we can still come see you. We will come to you. We can find some gas cards because you need to run that car in the middle of the night if this is where you want to go. We also find that our rural community is often much more hesitant about a shelter option. And obviously no one wants to be in shelter, but we do want everyone to be safe. And so we also find that Family Promise has been great about working with and respecting the wishes of our rural families. If they say, no, this is not the option I want, this is the best thing for my children right now, they have been incredibly supportive of that.
So helpful. This is such great information. I want to just put in a little housekeeping note. I've seen a few of our participants use the raise hand feature, and I'm so glad you did. Unfortunately, because it's a webinar, we have audio disabled for participants, and so that's why we're asking that you submit your questions into the Q&A box. And we have, I'm going to have some staff on standby for this next question, which is a great question. And so I'll start to address it, and then would love to open it up to you, Lisa, Deb, and Casey, to weigh in on how you're seeing this in your community. The question is, can you share any information regarding eligibility for immigrant families? And yes, we can. Schoolhouse Connection has several resources on identifying and supporting immigrant, migrant, refugee, and asylum-seeking families who often enter the country and move into a homeless living situation. And so we'll drop some links into the chat for our general resources, but want to open it up to Lisa, Deb, and Casey to share anything that you can about how you're seeing those needs in your community.
I can say we are absolutely seeing an increase in these needs in our community for sure. I just Just probably an hour before this webinar was talking to someone in our continuum of care about the increase over the last month or so. We've had a bigger increase than we've seen in a while. So and what does that process look like? They have unique needs that, we have to figure out, and we're maybe not the best, organization to figure that, right? So we've really had to connect with community partners to help to understand what are the needs that this population brings when they are experiencing a housing crisis. So for us, we would not provide services. So that, we definitely would provide services. We are not contingent on what their immigration status is. And we're going to connect them. I think the most important piece is we're going to connect them to the right resources to get their needs met. Maybe it's emergency shelter. Maybe it's connecting to those who are similar to their backgrounds in our community, right? What do they need school-wise? What are those language barriers, all of that we might be experiencing, that they might need. So our job really is a convener of getting the right people in the room. Because of the increase we have seen locally over the last 6 weeks or so, we've connected with our continuum of care and our coordinated entry system to help us, okay, from a statewide down to a more local effort. What are we doing to meet the unique challenges and needs of this particular population, right? So it's ongoing, but I think the most important part for us is, for our audience here, is that population is still a population that we serve. We just have to do it with more partners, right? We just have to, find what their unique situation is and then make sure that we have the right people in place.
And I think we're all open to being educated more and what the process is and what their
Yeah.
needs are. And some of them it's new. What does that mean? So I think we're all open to being educated more and just having a better knowledge of it so that we can serve the best we can.
And I'm so glad that you asked this question, because the other half of my job is supporting schools with refugee, immigrant, asylum seeker, English learner students. And our community traditionally has been a welcoming community, an arrival community for both Bethany Refugee and Samaritas. So we have very unique communities from around the world, both refugee resettled, asylum seekers, but then also immigrant communities that have come in to West Michigan. And now we are seeing that uptick in asylum seekers that are coming from New York, that are coming from Chicago. And so that is a new aspect for us, which is why exactly what Lisa and Deb were saying, the willingness to be educated about what these communities need, if we haven't experienced the particular community or culture before, but then also who are the right people to involve. And maybe our end is temporary housing or case management, but somebody else's end is really helping with culture, trauma, and connections to immigration status.
That is very helpful. And while we dream of a day when a homeless liaison can be just a homeless liaison, Casey, I'm glad to hear that you do have the benefit of wearing that other hat and seeing those connections across. I'm going to move us through some closing slides, but invite our audience to continue sharing any questions as they come to you. And let me just make sure, Lisa, I think I saw you come off mute, so I want to make sure there wasn't something else.
What I sent to you, Erin, a Word PDF, I should say a PDF version of the documents, because I didn't realize when I sent it out in the link that everyone would need access to that. So if that could be resent to the group, but I will make sure that for the MOU example in particular, I've already seen that are jumping through to my email asking for permission. So that was sent to you, and we'll make sure that it is shared broadly.
Perfect. We are so appreciative of that and your willingness to share. So we'll make sure the new version gets sent out. Just some closing slides and announcements for our audience. We have a scholarship at Schoolhouse Connection, and we would love if you work directly with students, if you know people who work directly with students who have experienced homelessness, We would love for you to share this opportunity. It does include financial assistance. We have a phenomenal team who really pours into these young people and make sure that they have the most positive post-secondary experience possible. And so you can find out more on our website, schoolhouseconnection.org/scholarship. I am inviting myself on one of their trips coming up in a few months because it's in Orlando and they just look like they have so much fun all the time. So we hope that you'll check that out. Just some additional resources that are linked on our website that we wanted to call your attention to. That new federal guidance that we mentioned that came out last September, which urges the expediting of ARP-HCY funds. That's a link there. You can also find more, lots of resources and best practices on our ARP-HCY resource page. And then we have a series called Flexing the Flexibility of ARP-HCY Funding. You heard Casey mention that these ARP-HCY funds can be used not only for the same 16 allowable uses of regular McKinney-Vento funding, but there's some more flexible opportunities that clearly Kent has been able to take advantage of. And so we've spotlighted other ways that districts across the country are using that flexibility. We would love to connect with you. We are on Facebook, Instagram, X, formerly known as Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, and of course, our new Slack community where we will be momentarily to continue this conversation if you have additional questions. We also encourage you to sign up for our mailing list. We send out about 1 e-news a week. You can get all kinds of updates on everything related to homeless education, from federal policy updates to spotlights like Kent and others, and opportunities to share with the community. One more plug for our Slack community. You can sign up at the link there, the bit.ly address on the bottom. And this is what Slack looks like. If it's new to you, it's a pretty easy to use interface, pretty much like any other social networking site where you can really connect and collaborate with others. We've already started to get in some questions from liaisons and others all across the country about using ARP-HCY funds. And you can see here, we've created some different channels for all of these different topics. So we will be in the ARP Partnerships channel in just a few minutes to answer your questions. We also talk about early childhood, contracting, motel stays, anything and everything ARP-HCY related. We would love for you to join us there. I want to say tremendous thank you again to all of our amazing presenters today, Casey, Lisa, and Deborah. We cannot thank you enough, not only for sharing your expertise and time today, but for everything you're doing every single day to improve the lives of children and youth experiencing homelessness in your community. I want to thank our audience for joining and being so engaged in this conversation. I hope you have one thing that you can take away and act on immediately wherever you may be in your communities. And like I said, look for this webinar recording and slides to be up on our website, and you'll get a copy in your email as well. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a wonderful afternoon.